So anyway, here is a nice picture of the hepatitis C virus. And we're first going to look at the natural history of hepatitis C infection. So basically, the natural history evolves over the course of decades, and it can be considered to have several different stages. And you can look at this slide and see that there's the first is the stage of resolution or recovery. So if you look at this slide, and you see the exposure, which is the acute phase when people are initially exposed to hepatitis C, you can see that there is a certain percentage of people, 15% approximately, who resolve the virus during the acute phase. And basically, they would develop virus and then acute hepatitis, which would be followed by resolution of the viremia with persistence of antibody. So hopefully everybody understands that that you would have a hepatitis C antibody that at that point would appear. The second stage is a stable chronic course. So everybody who is exposed to hepatitis C, whether it's resolved or becomes chronic, develops an antibody to hepatitis C. And this antibody does not necessarily is not protective from of hepatitis C. It is actually just shows that somebody has been exposed to hepatitis C. Kind of similar to HIV, for those of you who know HIV disease. So in the second stage is basically a stable chronic course of disease in which people who have been infected are viremic and have acute hepatitis, and initially will have may have very high levels of ALT, and over time the ALT decreases. However, people may experience initial very high levels of liver enzymes, ALT, and over the course of time have spiking of ALT, lowering of ALT. That's one of the characteristics of hepatitis C infection, is this up and down with ALT at a relatively low level compared to some other diseases, but initially you may have a very high level of ALTs, which would show an acute infection. So a person might have periodic elevations of liver enzymes, persistent viremia for several years, and this is the most common stage of hepatitis C. 85% of people, 80 to 85% of people who have hepatitis C or who have been exposed to hepatitis C have this chronic stable disease. So during this stage, it's believed that people may experience emergence of quasi-species, and those are the different, the various quasi-species that can be detected on more, not on the common lab test, but would have to be seen not through just genotype, but through testing quasi-species. It's not necessary for that to be done, but genotyping is necessary in terms of looking at outcomes of disease and hepatitis C. So here there's a relative ineffectiveness of the of antibodies, and so here people are both antibody positive and also have virus and have viremia. So in the last stage is severe progression. So if you see on this, you'll see that from here to here, you'll see that there's a group of people basically who say chronic stable disease, and it is not development of cirrhosis, but about 20% of people develop cirrhosis. Now, this is an old slide. If you look at this slide, you'll see it is from 1997. And one of the things is that at that time, there were many less people who had hepatitis C for a very long time. You can see that one of the things that we have learned over time and in this last 15 years is that while this slide shows about 80% stay chronic and 20% develop cirrhosis, we have learned that over the course of time that every 10 years we actually learn that approximately 10% more people develop cirrhosis. So somebody has had hepatitis C for 20 years, and that was about approximately what most people had at the time that this slide was put together. you can see it was 20% of people developed cirrhosis. But when somebody has it for 30 years, it's more like 30%, 40 years, 40%. So we know that there are some people who have had hepatitis C for 50 or 60 years, and 50% of those people develop cirrhosis, up to 60% of people developing cirrhosis. So that's one of the reasons that many, many, many more people are having problems with hepatitis C at this point, because they've had it for so much longer. Now, one of the other things is that, so you can see that there's this development of cirrhosis, but there's also slowly progressive disease, and there's also about 25% of the people with cirrhosis develop hepatocellular carcinoma, may need a transplant, or may die from hepatitis C. So there's more rapid progression to cirrhosis in this percentage of people, and there's possibly even hepatocellular carcinoma and or transplant death, as I mentioned. One of the other things that we know is that there is that alcohol, for example, is considered an important cofactor in hepatitis C and the progression to cirrhosis. So one of the things that I absolutely tell people, and I'm not somebody who tells many people not to do anything, alcohol is the one thing that I tell everybody with hepatitis C not to drink alcohol at all. There's evidence to suggest that there's greater than a 15-fold increase in incidence of cirrhosis in alcohol and people who are alcoholics, and who have greater than 5-fold increase with HIV as well.